and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over episode 16 of Kill la Kill. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, things were in a fairly dire state. Satsuki sort of revealed that she was playing everybody for a fool. Nudist Beach got all but annihilated. And, Ryuko had gotten Senketsu back in one piece, that was at a great cost. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about Kill la Kill, as opposed to something with a similar tone like Gurren Lagann, Gurren Lagann has a full episode that was essentially devoted to recapping the plot, whereas this initial sequence here, which is so far under a minute long, has basically recapped the entire plot thus far. It's a money-saving thing where they get to reuse animation to recap the plot, but I like how they keep it to a bare minimum in Kill la Kill. Granted, there has been a substantial amount of plot that's occurred, but, I think they recapped things as tactfully as possible while also reaping the benefits that recaps normally confer. So back to the present, Satsuki sort of informs Ryuko that she's basically won. And to be fair, she has good cause for believing that. Now, this is the first time we're hearing that new opening theme, but all things considered, I think it's pretty darn good. I especially like a lot of the symbolism in the opening animations. So back to the plot, we have, I guess, a scene of interest here, whereby the president of the sewing club and Satsuki's personal butler have to intervene on her behalf to kind of get Junketsu to, I guess, calm down. Otherwise, I assume it would threaten to do the same thing to her that Senketsu briefly did to Ryuko. So it seems like despite her indomitable will, Satsuki is not able to fully dominate Junketsu. Alright, so here's a plot point that I've missed before. Shiroi the captain of the sewing club is apparently related to the butler. So I guess his relationship to Satsuki is slightly more complicated than that of the other council chairs. And considering Nui Harime, the High Order Tailor, has, I guess, hijacked Satsuki's vessel, it seems like the plot is continuing to thicken. Based on some of what Nui's saying and how Satsuki's reacting, it seems like Satsuki and her mother aren't on super great terms. It also sort of seems like Satsuki wasn't entirely honest about the purpose of the raid trip to her mother. Or at least that's the implication I'm reading from it. So meanwhile, back in Osaka, things are essentially utterly ruined. Nudist Beach and Ryuko and everybody are sort of licking their wounds after fighting their way to a draw. Mikisugi is finally operating under the pretense that he's going to spill the beans on everything. So because Ryuko is going to be learning about all this stuff, it kind of goes without saying that Mako is forced to tag along regardless. Like, Ryuko says you can't tag along. Mikisugi says it's a good idea you don't tag along. But you can't really reason with Mako. So it doesn't take much resistance from Mako to get everybody to sort of accept her place among the group. So while Ryuko and the others are presumably heading into the ruins of the Nudist Beach base, Satsuki is going to be meeting with her mother, Ragyo. And, based off of the interactions we've seen before, they have a sort of stilted relationship. But even beyond that, Satsuki seems to be suffering from the after effects of having worn Junkets for too long. So, here's a little interesting shot here. Looking at Ragyo's back, you can see that sort of four-pointed star motif that appears on the Goku uniforms. I get the feeling that this is foreshadowing. So, once again, we have a rather uncomfortable scene where Ragyo displays why she is Mother of the Year. Yeah, that's profoundly uncomfortable. In no small part because Satsuki is clearly not on top of the situation like she is in almost every other appearance we've seen her. Like, the weird thing is, like, I feel like we're supposed to feel uncomfortable about this because as fan service laden as Kill la Kill generally is, like, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a normal person who finds stuff like this creepy, but I really feel like we're supposed to find this creepy instead of vaguely arousing. So, back in the destroyed nudist beach base, Mikisugi asserts that there's a whole lot more that Jakuzure didn't end up actually destroying. And it seems like he actually wasn't bluffing. Granted, they did take a lot of damage, but they're probably not as bad off as they initially seemed. So now it becomes clear that Ryuko's exhibitionism is something that runs in the family. Dr. Mato was the benefactor behind Nudist Beach, although why he funded them is not entirely clear. Obviously, they're standing up to life fibers, as was Dr. Matoi, but I don't know. It doesn't necessarily track to me that he would fund a bunch of weirdos like this. So Makisugi starts giving us a sort of a history lesson here. He's sort of playing around with the concept of what is it? Causation is not correlation. We we human beings did not evolve to wear clothes, but rather we evolved because we wore clothes. So life fibers are sort of an evolutionary instigator. So this, in my mind, is kind of one of the weaker plot points of Kill la Kill. Essentially, life fibers are parasitic aliens that shaped humanity into what it was for its own benefit. To be fair, I'm no writer. I don't know how I would rectify this issue so that it's not just, ooh, life fibers are aliens. But in my mind, it seems like that's the usual, I guess, plot twist to go for. Ooh, it's just aliens. I guess if I had it my way, I'd rather it be that life fibers were invented. And they're still all kinds of sinister, but they weren't necessarily extraterrestrial in origin. I mean, take that with a mountainous pile of salt. This is a very minor complaint in an anime that I otherwise greatly enjoy. Yeah. So now Mikisugi sort of states it explicitly that life fibers are aliens. Ryuko is notably hesitant to accept this, whereas Mako just takes everything at face value. So I think we're getting a little foreshadowing here too, where Mikiski really lays it on thick that in order to not kill the host, life fibers have to be worn externally. And despite their parasitic nature, they can't infect the host internally without killing it. I guess understandably, Senketsu is pretty unnerved about this whole thing. Although, I think he's taking it a bit too far. You know, he knows what he's like. He knows he's not an evil monster, so I don't think he should necessarily be upset that life fibers are parasitic aliens. I get it to a degree, but still. So the next big revelation is that Senketsu is sort of an anti-life fiber weapon. And only Ryuko is really capable of using Senketsu to its fullest. But there's also this implication here that Ryuko has high tolerance to life fibers, implying that her father had conducted some kind of test or otherwise figured this out. Furthermore, the whole reason Dr. Matoi knows about any of this to begin with is because he was involved with the Kiryuin conglomerate initially. So interestingly, we get a little glimpse at the timeline here. Senketsu was made relatively recently before Dr. Matoi died. You know, it wasn't as if he had been lingering and waiting in the basement for years or anything. So Mikiski is dropping another big plot bomb on us. Revox, the Kiryuin's clothing company, have secretly woven dormant life fibers into all the clothing they sell. So essentially, at their command, all the life fibers will become active and basically enslave the population of Earth that wears their clothing, which at this point is a plurality, if not a majority. So all the pieces are slowly coming into place, and it's painting a worrying picture for the fate of the world. Indeed, it seems like Ragyo is putting the last bit of the plan into motion. And funnily enough, Satsuki seems unnerved by it. It's sort of like you have to read between the lines, but there's an undercurrent of malice between Satsuki and Ragyo. Like, they're not outright threatening each other, but it's all tacit and in the tone of their voice. Now, this scene here that's just started, this is another one that kind of strikes me as a bit out of left field. It seems like a sort of strange tonal shift here, because Ryuko is now suddenly against using Senketsu to combat other life fibers. Just like the whole life fibers are really aliens things, it seems like this was sort of like a twist out of nowhere with no real build-up for it. At the core of the issue, I understand what Ryuko's saying, but it really seems like she came to the conclusion without thinking very hard about it. It seems like she's taking in all this evidence. Senketsu's life fibers are aliens. Senketsu needs to fight off the other life fibers because that's what he was designed for. And she comes to the conclusion that, well, I'm just not going to do that. I mean, I sort of understand what she's saying in theory, but Senketsu wasn't initially opposed to this, so I don't know why she jumped to this conclusion from the previous scene. Alright, well, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one.